To start with, that drilling was rock drills. Now, these are antiques here. They're really antiques. These are over 100 years old. But that's the epitome of the mining part of it, is drilling, breaking rock, let's put it that way. The name of the game is to break rock and send that rock to a mill to have it processed, and then the mill sends it to smelter.
Miners had their own terminology. You know, the front of a tunnel was the face or a heading, the top was the back, the sides were the ribs. That came from coal mining days when a miner was maybe in a coal seam, say 4 feet tall, and he's bent over as he's walking to work while his back is dragging the ceiling. If you're at the end, your head hits the face or the heading, so they called that the face or the heading. The sides were called the ribs because you'd be hitting your ribs on the sides. So those were old coal mining terms. I'd almost have to show you what a jackleg is. We have one around the corner. Okay, so that's a drill right there. Essentially, you take the drill like this and you put a telescoping leg on it. It's a pneumatically driven leg. So instead of trying, like here, they're pushing the drill by running this screw feed. The jackleg essentially is it's hinged. So the drill pushes, the drill steel is pounding and turning at the same time. At the same time, this telescoping leg is pushing that drill. So you don't have to do the air is doing all the work. The air is doing the pushing. So that's what a jackleg is. The other version of that is one that is not hinged. That's called a stoper. A stoper is just a leg and a drill, but it can only drill vertically. It just goes up and down, and that's used for mining in the stopes. A jackleg is usually used for driving tunnel or drift.
They did call the VCR vertical something retreat. They had a machine up there that came from underneath and pulled it up. And then when they got all their holes, these were, I think, 5-inch holes. When they got them all, they lined them up just like you would in a stope. Then they'd blast 6 feet at a time from the bottom and shoot down, and that'd be in a stope. You'd pull out that muck and shoot some more and keep going. Yeah, usually these stopes were 100 foot between. Each level was 100 foot. So then you'd leave 10 foot of pillar, they call it, where you could be on, still take your motors and everything across it. Then when everything ended up, they called it pulling pillars. So like our main ore pass at Sunnyside was over 1,000 foot. And what they'd done is took all the vein out and took all the pillars out.
It's vertical mining. And you'd take a raise up so far, and then you made pockets down below to pull the ore, and you'd have to hog all these pockets into just a big open room like this, and then you'd breast it down, but it's mining vertical instead of horizontal. Most places you had 2 or 3 cars, or maybe even 4 cars, and you'd fill them, and you had a electric motor, and you'd tram it to the ore pass and dump it, and then go back and fill them up again, do the same thing over and over again.
Mucking machine is essentially a big square box that's on wheels. It has a big bucket in the front, and one lever will move the mucking machine back and forth. It can turn either way, and it picks that bucket up. You just jam it into a pile of ore at the face or the heading, and pick that ore up, throw it back into an ore car, fill up that ore car, change them out, bring them back. To me, one of our main tools as a trammer was the locomotive. We drove either, I think it was 5-ton diesels or electric. I liked electric better, so you didn't have to suck the diesel smoke. Diesel smoke actually, even though they told us it was okay, it turns out it's very carcinogenic. It's not good for you. And then at the bottom of that is a chute, and then the trammers will come in below that chute. You'll open the gate, fill an ore car, signal, bring the ore car up, open the gate again. So that's what trammers do. When I worked main level ore pass, that was at the very bottom. We'd load there were 10-ton ore cars. We'd load those and then drive 2 miles outside and dump it outside where a front end loader would load it into dump trucks, and then it would be sent to the Mayflower mill.
You know, in the mill, you had a jaw crusher, so when the trucks brought the ore down, they would dump it into the coarse ore bin. It would come in on a belt and go into a jaw crusher. From a jaw crusher, it would go on another belt, and if it was fine enough, then it would go up to what they would call the fine ore bin, that now is down to little pieces like this and maybe a foot long. So you would replenish that, and then it would go from there to the mill, and it would go to another mill, to another crusher that was a ball mill, and it was an 8x6 ball mill, and that would crush it down even finer. And then the material that would come out of there would go over what you would call a jig. And if it was fine enough, and that's kind of where your gold was, and it would just oscillate, and the gold would fall to the bottom, and then that gold would be on a table, and it would just float over to the amalgamation, and then they would go through the process of making the gold bullion, which was about 90% pure gold, and then it was shipped out to be processed. But it just went from the 8x6 to a 6x5 ball mill. From there, once it got small enough, then it would go, they would add chemicals to it to promote the lead and the zinc to float to the top of the float cells, and it had paddles on it, and they just looked like big old air bubbles, but it was zinc or lead, and they would float. They would take the material off the top, drop it down into a trough, and then from that trough, it would go into what they called a thickener tank, and it would just settle in the bottom, and it would just keep spinning and spinning. So you had your zinc, your lead, and your copper that were down there. I would say, you know, if it was a good day, you would produce somewhere, depending on the material that was coming out of the mine, you could produce 100 tons of zinc, maybe a little bit more, and about 75 to 80 tons of lead, and about 20 tons of copper. And then all that stuff would be hauled out and processed. The biggest thing is when it went to the filters, you wanted it to suck all the moisture out of the material so it was as dry as possible in order to be shipped, so you weren't paying for water being shipped, you were paying for the concentrate to be shipped. So that was kind of the mill process.
What I would say, the brutality of the job just hasn't changed much. You're just using heavy equipment. It's very dangerous. You know, the old days it was dangerous. Even with safety stuff, mining is still a very dangerous field, and so that hasn't changed at all.